Wednesday, June 14th, 7 p.m. I'm Bob Harris here on the Football Diehards YouTube channel, and it's time to go on the hot seat. FootballDiehards.com is the website. We appreciate you joining us here on the YouTube channel every Wednesday at this time, also on Saturdays at noon Eastern, where we do our Ask Me Anything and have a great time there as well. Hit the subscribe button and the notification bell if you haven't already. Also the like button. We like it when you like it or dislike it. I don't care which one. I'm going to do the initial dislike just so everyone feels comfortable. Got questions? Hi, Robert. Nice to see you in the chat. I'll be answering questions throughout. We'll be kicking some things around with our guest tonight. We, as always, have a fantastic guest. A lot of newsy things going on, a lot of mini camp news and stuff. We're going to have some Buffalo Bills talk. Again, going to save that for the guest, but a few other things going on. Royal, good evening. We're having a great week. Working on magazines, the Fantasy Football Pro Forecast. Hi, Andrea. Pro Forecast, the digital version is available on the site. You want to go ahead and go and make your purchase. Use the promo code DieHards to get a 15% discount when you make your purchases on the website. We're working on the DieHards magazine right now. Should have that done soon. And things are going wonderfully. It's a delightful evening. We're letting everyone get into the chat before I bring in our great guest tonight. Yeah, there's a lot going on. We'll talk about the Stefon Diggs issues, which seem to be somewhat resolved, and we have a great guest for that tonight as well. But beyond that, a lot of chatter about Dalvin Cook, who wants apparently all the money and not realizing the running backs aren't getting all the money. Jonathan Taylor, optimistic he'll get all the money. I don't know that he'll get all of it. Chris Olave looking to build on that strong rookie season, wants to be the best. DeAndre Hopkins visiting the Patriots. Justin Jefferson will report to camp with or without a new contract. The question is, will he take part in camp without the contract? Because, holding in is the new holding out. Nobody's holding out because it's cost prohibitive. Hey, Joe Aber, nice to see you. Glad you could make it. So there's a lot to kick around. So I'm going to go ahead and without further delay, bring on our guest tonight. He's been writing for the Fantasy Football Pro Forecast for a number of years now, works for the FTN Fantasy People, Fade the Noise, does a great job. Adam Pfeifer, you can follow him on Twitter at APfeifer24. That's APFEIFER, numerals 24. You should check him out. He does great work. He's done fantastic work for us. Adam, welcome to the program. Thanks for coming, man.
Bob, always a pleasure. Thanks for having me. You chose the right week to have me on for some of this Bills drama, which I'm with you. It appears to be pretty much. It was probably overblown to start with yesterday, but it appears to be on the back end now.
Hello, David E. Hello, Charles. Yes, it does appear to be, but is it really? So in case anyone hasn't been following along at home, Stefon Diggs apparently showed up Tuesday and did his physical and did all his things and then didn't practice, right? And head coach Sean McDermott said, hey, it's a big concern. What's going on here? Big concern. I mean, that was his words, not my words, his words. Josh Allen came out and did his press conference and sounded like he was mea culpa, like he did something wrong to Stefon Diggs. We've got to get this right. We've got internal issues, all these things. Today, Stefon Diggs back on the field. Sean McDermott says it's all resolved. I thought it was interesting, something that Mike Florio wrote at Pro Football Talk or put out on his Twitter was basically, when you trade for disgruntled players, don't be surprised if some point you have a disgruntled player. He's shown that, Adam. So, we get caught up in these things this time of year, and I do think, when week one rolls around, this will all be forgotten. But is there a little bit of a concern, as a big Bills fan, in the back of your mind, going back to last year, the reaction to, the final loss, all that.
Thanks
Is
for
there
reminding
some concern with Stefon Diggs? Oh, you're welcome for that. There's some concern with Stefon Diggs just in general.
I think that's especially for Bills fans. I think, especially when you also add the fact that prior to them trading for Diggs 3 years ago, they had gone such a long time without like a true one. Like they were bringing in, they had Watkins for a little bit. They brought in Kelvin Benjamin. Prior to that, they had Terrell Owens. So, I think even more so now that not only have they, brought in a top flight wide receiver, but he's played, at one of the highest levels since he's been with the Bills. So I think because of the expectations and how important he is to the team, there's probably always going to be, for a lot of Bills fans, that thought in the back of the head. But I honestly think I wonder how much, and I've seen some stuff about a lot of Bills media and people that follow the team closely. Maybe there's some speculation about it being offensive system related because Stefon Diggs absolutely loved Brian Daboll, and I'll be the first to admit wasn't a huge fan of what we saw from Ken Dorsey last season. And there were a lot of games where Diggs would get 8, 9 targets in the first half and then 1, 2 in the second half. I will say a lot of that's because teams just straight up doubled him because they were not afraid of Gabriel Davis. But I think at the end of the day, as long as he's already on the field now, starting today, but even if he didn't, even if he wasn't on the field today, I would have been okay. If we got to July, late July, and this is still an issue, then I'd be really concerned. But I think for Bills fans, especially after everything we've kind of been through and continue to go through in terms of expectations and letdowns, I think it'll probably always be a little bit in the back of the head.
Yeah, there's always got to be a little angst, a little drama. This seems to be the ongoing thing of the NFL in general. I mean, every year we've got to have a number of these situations that are kind of soap opera style and seem to never end. And maybe there'll be flare-ups with Diggs, maybe not. I've always thought, Adam, and you can maybe give me your thoughts on this. His relationship with Josh Allen, regardless of how Josh Allen was talking yesterday, about he needed to do some things better. It seems like they have as good a relationship, an off-field friendship as anybody in the game right now, like any quarterback wide receiver duo, right?
I still remember, I think it was either the beginning of last year or his second season with the team. There was, I believe, Diggs was mic'd up. Maybe both were mic'd up, especially Diggs. And it was either practice or before the game warm-ups. They were stretching, and I think it's probably actually it's a Thanksgiving game. So it's a Thanksgiving game, either Dallas or this past season against Detroit. And they're I think Josh told him that he was thankful for him, and Steph kind of replied and said, "Thankful for you too." And then he said more. I remember he said more than you'll know, and he started to get choked up a little bit. So I 100% agree that they have a really good connection, and things happen sometimes. Sometimes there's disagreements with your best friend, your brother, whatever. So and I think at the end of the day, Steph knows he's a captain of this team. Same with Josh, and they have to set the tone. So I'm just, again, was a little confused yesterday as a Bills fan, but I'm kind of relaxed now, and I'm just ready to watch one of the best duos in the league go at it again for the 4th year.
Relax until it flares up, then it'll get a little angsty, and then it'll cool down. Your point is dead on.
I mean it's also Bills fans. I don't know if there's such a thing as a calm Bills fan, especially myself, when I'm just I just a game in October, my anxiety level is through the roof. So it's tough to kind of tell the Bills fan base to kind of relax. It's tough.
Right. I totally get that. And by the way, good evening, Dame. Good evening, Mr. Scampers. Thanks everyone again for coming. Stick around if you got questions. The Detroit game, Andrea says. And I remember that one as well. I think the interview you were talking about, and that really stuck with me. And just you're totally right though. Football's an emotional game. It's the disappointments and great excitement, and the roller coaster ride, and those emotions can really tax you. And at the end of last season, with the Damar Hamlin situation, I mean, everybody had to be a little afraid by that point. So not surprising. Just before we get into it, if y'all haven't seen it, Adam every year does a great sleeper and bust, picks a sleeper and bust for every single team. We're going to touch base on some of those from the Pro Forecast this year. It's been a fantastic article. It's been great. I was just say, Adam, you've become a phenomenal writer. You've developed greatly over the course of time since I met you, and just couldn't be happier to have you in the book every year. You just do a phenomenal job. That article has been a mainstay, and hope it is for a long time. So I want to just, before we get into some of that stuff, though, and we'll get into some of the other newsy items, y'all, if you got questions, throw them out there. I'll get to them here at some point. Just the Bills in general, since we got you here. Joe Abear, Bills, a.k.a. Team Wide Right. So how do you think that backfield's going to play out just in general? We maybe don't have all the pieces there. I don't know. I think we do. Let's assume it's Damian Harris, getting some early down work, James Cook getting a fair amount of work. How do you see that being divided up?
So it's tough because Brandon Beane, I think it was leading up to the draft, and like right after free agency was talking very highly of James Cook and how is excited to see him in a larger role. And then McDermott was speaking very highly of Damian Harris after they signed him. And like, this is where I struggle because every year it's like, okay, Josh Allen is really getting the carries that we value for fantasy anyway. And every offseason, it's Josh Allen is going to run less. Josh Allen is going to run less. And it hasn't happened. So like every year when people are saying that, I don't believe it personally. This year, I will say, though, as far as I recall, and I tend to think I follow this team as closely as anybody, this seems to be, in my opinion, from what I remember, the first year where Josh himself has been more vocal about not running as much. And if that does come to fruition, this is obviously one of the 5 best offenses in football. And, like, I'm a huge Devin Singletary fan, and he was productive. Obviously, the fantasy production wasn't amazing because he didn't have massive touchdown upside, but on a per-carry basis, he was one of the most efficient players at his position because he's an underrated talent, but also Devin Singletary the last 2 seasons has been top 5 in percentage of carries against light boxes. Like, you can't stack the box against Buffalo. I think we saw that with James Cook at times last year because James Cook was actually one of the most efficient running backs on a per-carry basis last season. But he has more explosiveness than Singletary. What we didn't see is the work in the passing game from really anybody in the backfield. I think the Bills for 2 years now have made an effort to get more yards after the catch production. I think they want to do that with James Cook. But I'll tell you what, if like Josh Allen really doesn't run as much, especially at the goal line, I think that's Damian Harris's role. And if that's the case, like we saw what Jamal Williams did last year, doing nothing receiving and just getting touchdowns. I'm not saying anybody's going to get 17 rushing touchdowns again like Jamal Williams got, but for me, the X factor is just honestly Josh Allen. Like I just don't, because it's not like Josh Allen just like makes plays, occasionally scrambling. Like it is a massive part of their offense. The QB power they draw up, it's huge. Like I don't think you take that out of their offense. So what it really comes down to is do they call fewer design rushing attempts, fewer quarterback power plays, especially in the red zone. I haven't been actively drafting the Bills running backs, but like the upside play is obviously James Cook, but he might be in the same boat. Like nobody wanted to draft Singletary except for me the past like 5 years, and now all of a sudden people really want to draft James Cook. And I get it; he's a more explosive player, but the situation's pretty much identical, except there was only 1 year where Singletary really had, let alone Josh Allen, a fellow running back to take goal line work. He had Frank Gore for 1 year where Gore got all of the goal line work. So I don't know. James Cook feels a little bit overvalued to me, but I understand the appeal. Young, talented player. Catches passes, and he's in a top 5 offense. But for me, the X factor is, will Josh Allen actually run less? I don't know.
Yeah, as you know, I always draft all the Harrises I can. Damian going as running back 41 seems like, I'm getting some shares of that, and I feel like I'm overpaying for it. James Cook currently running back 30. I feel like he might be actually a pretty good bargain at this point. We'll see. I'm starting to come around a little bit. I know there are people out there who are really keen on James Cook. I have not been one of them for the reasons you outlined, but we'll see if that comes around. If you're in the chat out there, let us know what you think of the Buffalo running back situation. Gabe Davis, wide receiver 39 this year. This seems like a more reasonable price, or is it still a little high for you?
No, and so I was very high on Gabe Davis, as many people were last season, and he scored the first touchdown of the NFL season last year. So it was a great hour and a half for the Gabe Davis hype train. And then, the appeal for me with Gabe Davis the past couple of seasons, and I've written about it actually in the magazine because he's been in the article, has been end zone targets. Like despite being a limited player in terms of snaps from 2020 and 2021, he was like top 12 in end zone targets for both those seasons. And then we project an every down role. Why would you not like Gabe Davis? He did deal with an ankle injury that, he played through it. He still played a ton of snaps. But for me, Gabe Davis at that price, I think it's actually an easy selection, barring some miracle DeAndre Hopkins move, because he might actually be top 5 in the NFL in snaps and routes. He doesn't leave the field at all. And, he's going to have some bad games, obviously, but he obviously has some upside, like the Pittsburgh game where he had 3 for 160 and 2 touchdowns. His targets that he gets, granted, he doesn't see 8 to 10 per game, but the targets he sees are either 20 yards down the field or in the end zone. And as a wide receiver 4, or a flex, yeah, I mentioned it. So it's tough after like recency bias and how he was very disappointing last season. But yeah, you mentioned the difference in ADP. Like I think that's you talk about post type sleepers. I think Gabe Davis is outside of maybe Kyle Pitts, maybe the best you can look at right now.
Yeah, I was Gabe skeptical last year. I don't have a lot of shares. And by the way, in the chat, Mr. Scampers, 0 shares of James Cook, and he's fine being wrong. That's where I've been too. I have only recently, I just double checked. I got my first share this past week, and that might be enough. I just want a little taste. That's all I need. I want to make sure I'm kind of always going for the cheaper pieces. I feel like I'm a sucker for this one in case it's Harris Royal Slade is with me as well. We'll move on from the Bills here, but one more question. I want to get your take on the Dalton Konciad. I know Matt Waldman, my buddy from the rookie scouting portfolio, has a pretty optimistic outlook. Maybe not early in the season, but as the season wears on, seeing them use him as a bit of a chess piece, along with Dawson Knox on the field at the same time. Maybe a big slot kind of role that we'll see some of. What are your expectations for Dalton Konciad, if you have any?
Yeah, so Brandon Beane talked about it. I think Brandon Beane said that Konciad was the last player they had a first-round grade on, so that's why they traded up for him. Plus, Dallas was ahead of them, so it makes sense. I honestly think there's a lot of elements here. I think, a team they struggled with in the past, Kansas City, Travis Kelce. I think they want their version of Travis Kelce. Not saying Konciad will be one of the 5 best tight ends of all time, but there's been comps there, obviously. Also, I mentioned this before. They want more yards after the catch. Konciad was great at that at Utah. But here's the thing that's really interesting. Brandon Beane talked about how they can run more 12 now, which they really don't run 12 because they mostly run 3 and 4 wide. But they can run more 12 now with Konciad and Knox on the field. And it forces defense to defend you completely differently. Right. Base defenses they have are completely different. So they're excited about that. And the other thing, this has been kind of the focal point of a lot of these teams that have faced Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, Joe Burrow, these high-powered passing offenses, a lot more cover 2 shells, a lot more deep safeties. Teams are playing zone so much against Buffalo, and Dalton Konciad was so good at Utah at finding soft spots in zone coverage. So, yeah, Ken Dorsey earlier this offseason or summer, I guess, kind of said that they're still kind of figuring out what his role is, which people like took that and were like, oh, this is bad news. I'm like, is it? Like, it's a rookie tight end who they've practiced with for a day and a half. Like, it's not like they're dropping in Tony Gonzalez or offense and saying, okay, we know what we're getting. So I have high expectations for Konciad helping the Bills offense. For fantasy, though, like I think in a lot of these best ball drafts, he's going like tight end 12. I think it's a little too high.
Yep.
But if they do use him as that just, huge slot wide out because they don't have a slot receiver right now, really, then I could be completely wrong and he could be legitimately top 8, top 9 because the Bills will throw a ton. And like he moves differently for a tight end. He's undersized, but he has good movement skills. So he can fit that kind of, Mike Gesicki role, but be better than Mike Gesicki.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And we'll see what it comes of it. I'm not like eagerly pursuing rookie tight ends as a general rule. They tend not to do well, but we'll see. We'll see how it goes. I'm ending up with a lot of rosters at this point where I'm adding like a third tight end, throwing a flyer at somebody. So we'll see about that.
If there was a year where the rookie tight end did do it, I feel like it would be this year because if you watched, obviously you watched the NFL draft, but like the NFL draft was really kind to rookie tight ends. They landed in so many great spots. You have Konciad with Buffalo, Michael Mayer with the Raiders, Sam Laporta in Detroit, 2 Green Bay tight ends. Like there's really good landing spots. So if there was a season where it actually would be productive for the rookie tight ends, it might be this one.
Yeah, we'll see how that plays out. I'm kind of with you on that. I think of all the positions, I thought tight end going into this one seemed like very deep. I thought it would suppress the value of them, and it kind of did push the prices down. So that maybe that's not indicative exactly of how teams view them. They knew the prices would be down because there was a large share, so they didn't have to go as early. So I thought it was interesting that the ones who did go early. I think it's worth noting the Konciad, Laporta, Mayer to some degree. So there you have that. We have a question in the chat from Thomas. He wants to know if we think of Bijon Robinson as being overhyped as a first-round pick. First of all, let me just say that we're drafting everyone in the first round at what we perceive to be their ceiling. That's why they're going at the first round. We're expecting them to deliver that return, right? So yes, Bijan is probably being overhyped as a first round pick because he's got to hit his ceiling, and there's a lot of treasury. But rookie running backs who earn that kind of draft capital tend to get the workloads necessary cash in on that. I said earlier today on Fantasy Dirt, sitting in for Fabiano, I said to a caller, I said, like, if you think Bijon Robinson is not going to fare well, look what Tyler Algier did. And I said, Tyler Algier is just a guy. It's nothing against Tyler Algier. He's a 5th round pick, right? He wasn't even locked to make the roster going in. Here we have Bijon Robinson. I'm pretty sure there are plans. How comfortable or how high are you willing to select him, or how high will you go to make sure you have a share of him before all is said and done?
Yeah, he's currently my running back 4, so he's behind Ekeler, McCaffrey, and I might even put him to 3, honestly. But you mentioned Algier. Like, I think Algier is a solid player, but look at what he did last season.
Right.
Like, he was over 1,000 yards. He was 9th in the league in yards before contact per rush. From week 10 on, once he really took over that 1A role, he was 10th in rushing yards, 7th in 100-yard games, 3rd in yards per attempt. And a lot of that's because Arthur Smith's running scheme is really favorable, and the Falcons have the most underrated, one of the 3 best run-blocking offensive lines, especially when they run to the right, which is led by their all-pro guard, Chris Lindstrom. Algier averaged 6.2 yards per carry on runs to the right. And, we know Bijon's a generational prospect. They've talked about lining him up in the slot, out wide, whatever. But, you draft him 8th overall when your team definitely has other positions to address. He's getting the football. I think there's been, since 2015, 5 running backs selected in the top 10 of the NFL draft. The running backs that have been selected in the top 10 during that span have averaged 291.4 touches during their rookie season. So, obviously, Zeke, Fournette, McCaffrey, they got a ton of work. So, I don't see why Bijon, in an offense that really ran the ball more than anybody outside of Chicago, I don't see why he wouldn't get a ton of work. I love the scheme. I love the player. So, yeah, I think he belongs in the first round. Zeke, Saquon, they went in the first round when they were rookies.
Totally agree with you. And the offensive line, that was my point on Algier. Nothing against Algier. I mean, but again, He was not necessarily locked to make the roster going into camp, right? He was a later round pick. So that offensive line, and maybe Arthur Smith does know a little bit of something about offense. I keep reminding people he was the one who figured out how to turn Cordero Patterson into a thing, even though many other coaches, including one named Bill Belichick, could never figure that out. So I'm guessing they will find ways to maximize the value. And I'm with you. I have them rated pretty highly. I'm not that high. You mentioned Ekeler, McCaffrey, someone else. Is that your order? Is Ekeler 1 and McCaffrey 2 for you?
I recently moved Ekeler ahead after the fact that we know he'll be here at least this season. And McCaffrey's splits with Elijah Mitchell last year weren't that favorable. He only averaged 14, 15 carries per game. And the snap share went down. Obviously, he'll make up for it by catching 4 or 5 passes most weeks. But Ekeler right now has a goal line role, is going to catch maybe not as many passes in Kellon Moore's offense because Joe Lombardi was just not letting Justin Herbert throw deep. But he'll still catch as many passes probably as anybody. So I do have Ekeler 1, McCaffrey 2. But I think I might put Bijon 3 because Saquon's got the contract situation right now. Jonathan Taylor, who I think will be fine, still isn't practicing, but I think Bijon's upside. And I actually wrote an article at FTN Fantasy. I do this crossroad series where I debate 2 players going right at the same spot in drafts. And I debated Bijon and Taylor, and I think I'm going to put Bijon ahead. So I think I'm going to put Bijon 3.
I think that's it's not unreasonable, and I think exactly what you said is correct. By the way, we're talking with Adam Pfeifer. In case you did not know, you can follow him on Twitter at @apfeifer24. That's PFEIFER, or just go to my Twitter feed at FootballDieHard and click on him. If you're not already following me, you should be. He does great work at FTN Fantasy. Also, good work in the Pro Forecast magazine. The digital version of that is available on the website right now. You can check it out. It'll be on newsstands too. If you like the tangible item to hold in your hands, will be out on newsstands shortly. And Adam does a great article. I want to just touch on some guys that I noticed in the article this year that I think are very interesting. And what we have Adam do, in case you haven't seen it, if you haven't seen it, why? We asked him to do a sleeper and or bust, for every team, all 32 teams. And so there's a player in particular. There's a couple players that I'm interested in. Let's talk though about a couple guys that you don't expect to fare well. I don't, and I guess I agree with. I keep asking people because I've been drafting a bunch of Curtis Samuel lately. I asked people which Samuel scored more points last year, Curtis or Deebo, and it was Curtis Samuel. Look, Deebo missed games. I get it, but it just seems like the role has not been that super robust, mixed role that we've seen. And I don't know that I expect that to change with McCaffrey on board. Is that your issue with it?
Yeah, like Deebo's 2021 season was obviously unbelievable. A lot of that, though, was like almost 60 rushing attempts, an insane touchdown rate that obviously came back down. For me, though, it's obviously McCaffrey. Like his splits with McCaffrey weren't great to start with. His rush attempts went down, especially close to the red zone. The 7 games he played alongside McCaffrey, he averaged under 7 targets, 4 receptions, 11 PPR points per game. So he was like over 4 fantasy points per game less once McCaffrey was there. And then like adding to the fact that Brandon Ayuk took a huge step forward as a breakout candidate last season. Kittle's still going to get his 5-6 targets. And I don't know, like there were a lot of high upside targets for Deebo Samuel because he was, 82nd in yards per target, the lowest ADOT among qualified receivers at 4.5. He averaged 2.5 yards before the catch per reception last year. That was the lowest among receivers. That's like running back type usage in the passing game. So Deebo is one of those players that I'm terrified to be wrong about because he's one of the best overall football players on the planet. I just don't like the usage and the role. And like the targets he's getting, like if you're getting 5-6 targets per game, a couple of those better be down the field. Now Deebo is the best yak player in the league, so he can take a 4-yard pass and make it 40 very easily. But I just think where he's going, like I'm taking a lot of receivers around him more, and even like Ayuk goes like 10 to 12 wide receiver spots later himself, and I would just rather take Ayuk.
I would rather take Ayuk. I'll go ahead and say it. If they both play 17 games this year, Ayuk has better numbers.
I agree.
He looks like the momentum is working in his favor. Game Overboard telling us Diggs just went 104 in a best ball. The earliest squeaky wheel narrative yet. It is. That's as early as I've. It's interesting though, and that's one of the things we talk about. And you'll see it if you're out there in the best ball rooms right now. I generally have 4 or 5 drafts ongoing at any time, and you'll see these newsy items reflected in the moment. So let's see. I'm not sure what I get the question, Dalvin. Oh, I get Dalvin Cook. I think he said 10 and redraft. Oh, you're looking to draft Robinson. And by the way, I said in the chat that I wasn't looking to draft any rookies this year. I meant in Dynasty because I'm looking to trade all my picks into next year when the draft is better. But if I am, I've invested in the tight end position, going with running backs. I've gotten Jackson Smith and Jigba, Jahmyr Gibbs. So I'm not like totally out. But I'm looking forward to next year's draft, I think, from a dynasty perspective. DeAndre Hopkins is running around out there looking for a home. The New England Patriots are one of the homes. I'm hoping that's not the case because I kind of like one of your sleeper players, Tyquan Thornton. Go ahead and tell me why I'm so smart to be looking at him.
Yeah, and look, like honestly, like when you have to, some teams are more difficult than others. I will admit, but like Tyquan Thornton, if you remember, is like a really talented prospect. 4.2, low 4.3, high 4.2 40 time, and we know that New England, like they pretty much had no OC last year, right? And now you bring in Bill O'Brien, who can actually have some function in this offense, and Juju is already dealing. He's already banged up right now. Tyquan Thornton. Like, they pretty much only used him as a vertical threat on a team that didn't take a lot of vertical shots. I think as long as Hopkins doesn't sign there, which honestly might happen, it sounds like. But if he doesn't, like, he's competing with Juju for targets. Jacoby Myers left. I think Jacoby Myers is a better player than Juju. And, you have the tight ends there, but they're not even running 12 personnel like they used to as often. So, really, you're competing with Juju and Rhamondre Stevenson for targets, potentially. I think there's still upside for him, not to be, a top 35 wide receiver, but somebody that could, your 17th, 18th round selection could give you some weeks because he has big play potential. He's incredibly fast, and the overall functionality of the offense should be better with Bill O'Brien there. But if DeAndre Hopkins signs there, it's completely over.
I should put that in context. I mean, he's for me, if I'm on best ball 10s, he's a 20th round pick, right? You're able to get him there. And you see people, I mean, I don't know that I would be any less excited about him or enthusiastic towards him than I am like for Rashid Shaheed, who you see going a little bit earlier in a lot of these drafts. He's a little more sexier name, a little more prominent out there. And so I just think, some of these late round flyers are great. Quick question here. New England will play way more 2 tight ends this year, says Royal Slade, a renowned Patriots fan.
They should, but they
Deebo,
didn't. They didn't.
yeah.
They didn't after they brought in. They remember 2 off seasons ago. They spent so much money, and it was immediately on Hunter Henry and Jonnu Smith, and they still didn't run a lot of 12, which was very surprising.
Yeah. Jeno Smith was a failed experiment, it turned out. I mean, and he was the one they got first. I mean, he was the first of the 2 they landed at that time. So A.J. Brown or Stefon Diggs, you're sitting in your draft room. That choice is facing you. You need a receiver right there. Well, who you taking?
I still have Diggs. I just think he has a better chance of getting like a 28 to 30% target share. Devonta Smith quietly operated as their 1A down the stretch last season. They're both obviously amazing, Smith and A.J. Brown, but like Diggs, unless Dalton Konciad is like the best rookie tight end ever, Diggs will have less competition for targets. And I just think overall, A.J. Brown will obviously have some. I think A.J. Brown's like week-to-week ceiling. Like he has a higher chance of having those like 180 in 2 games, but Diggs he's going to have a higher floor and he'll have more targets. So it's obviously close back-to-back, but I still lean Diggs.
Yeah, I'm Diggs as well. Royal Slade making a great point. And it's a point I wanted to make while we were still talking about the Patriots is, you mentioned, the coordinator situation. Think about what happened with the Giants last year, where, by the way, one like a co-coordinator, Joe Judge was the head coach in New York. Brian Dable goes there, and I felt like the offense would get better, a little better. It got more better than I expected, and I
miss Brian Dable so much.
I bet so. I'm wondering if we aren't going to see something similar, like just maybe a bigger leap than we might realize. I always try to downplay it in my mind, but I do think, with a legit play caller, Bill O'Brien, whatever you think of him as a general manager or head coach or whatever, he's a legit offensive coordinator. He's a good play caller. So I'm hoping for some more offense there, and so is Mac Jones and all the pieces. Rhamondre Stevenson. Is Rhamondre Stevenson top 12 for you, top 10? Where is he at on your rankings?
I'll have to double check. He's definitely top 12. I think I have him and Pollard like in that 8-9 range in full PPR. So I'm not freaking out about the Ty Montgomery news just yet.
Right.
So
I guess we're getting a question about how we feel like that depth will shake out, and I'm kind of with you. I think it's going to be a lot of Rhamondre Stevenson. I know Ty Montgomery's getting a little buzz as like a receiving back. I think that came from didn't that come from Ivan Fears, who is like retired now and not necessarily a coach? He was just kind of opining on it and talked up Ty Montgomery. I don't know if I expect much from Pierre Strong, Kevin Harris, J.J. Taylor, any of those guys. Maybe they add a piece, but for right now, I think Rhamondre Stevenson's a well-rounded enough piece that they may lean on him very heavily. I know their tradition has been to break that backfield up. I don't know if that's the plan this year. What do you think?
I understand there's trepidation because it's Belichick, but like those past offenses had like obviously we've seen Harris and Stevenson as of recent, but then they've had really, really solid players in the backfield, like Danny Woodhead, Stephen Ridley, Dion Lewis, Blunt. Like right now they don't have anything after Stevenson. Like there was the one game where he left early where they got some production from the rookies from last year, but like they could have given Stevenson, like Stevenson was getting like close to like Najee Harris rookie season type snap usage down the stretch last season. So I wouldn't expect that, but right now, like there's no reason for me to believe they also could have addressed the position in the draft, and they didn't.
Right.
So
and they did not.
To be fair, they drafted 2 running backs last year, so maybe that's why they didn't. But I'm not worried.
And what Royal Slade is thinking strong. We'll pass Montgomery fairly quickly, and we'll see. I mean, he may have already passed him. I don't even know if Ivan Fears, has like the inside knowledge of how things are going right now as a retired coach. But he was quoted heavily. JSC wants to know, Adam, Lamar Jackson or Joe Burrow, which quarterback would you rather have on your fantasy team? I think the consensus I've seen has been Burrow is going after that top tier. The top 3 are coming off within the third, by the end of the third round. Joe Burrow is almost exclusively the next guy off. Is Lamar Jackson going to start climbing up your ranks, or do you already have him a little higher?
So this is honestly such a good question because I mentioned that Crossroads series I'm doing. The one after the Bijan Jonathan Taylor one was Joe Burrow and Lamar Jackson. And I'll spoil it. I went with Lamar Jackson. It's obviously very close, but for me, like if I'm drafting a quarterback where they're coming off the board, I want a quarterback that can finish ahead of Hurts, ahead of Mahomes, ahead of Allen. Joe Burrow maybe can, but I think Lamar Jackson has a much higher chance because we've seen it. Like, we've seen when he's healthy, 0.76, 0.54, 0.65 fantasy points per drop back. Obviously missed time last season. 64 rushing yards per game. Like, he's got a chance to rush for 700 to 1,000 yards, and now he's in this new offense where he's probably going to set career highs in pass attempts. He has more talent than he's had in his entire career, just overall, I think, on offense with Odell, Zay Flowers, hopefully a healthy Rashad Bateman, obviously Mark Andrews. Like, you look at Todd Monken's history as a play caller, he was with Tampa Bay and Cleveland. In 2019 with Cleveland, the Browns were 10th in passing rate on early downs. Tampa Bay in 2018 were 4th in passing rate on early downs. This is going to be a little bit of a different offense from what we've seen in the past with Greg Roman. And like Lamar Jackson's, when he's actually had Hollywood Brown and Mark Andrews and decent talent, he's been up there in yards per pass attempt and a lot of those metrics. Last year he was throwing to Devin Duvernay, DeMarcus Robinson, Sammy Watkins, Deshaun Jackson at times. Like, for me, it comes down to, I love Joe Burrow. I understand there's so much hype there with him too. They will throw a lot. But if you're getting like 450 to 500 pass attempts and 100 to 120 rushing attempts from Lamar Jackson, there is a chance that he can finish ahead of Mahomes, Hurts, and Josh Allen. So if I'm taking a quarterback in the first 4 or 5 rounds, I want somebody that can kind of do what Lamar Jackson did his MVP season. So I'm still chasing that upside. I still think Lamar is an incredible player. So I'm going with Lamar Jackson.
I totally get that too. And by the way, I think it was Baker Mayfield had his career year under Monken, and we've seen that Georgia offense the last 2 years light up the entire world, and it seems to fit the personnel. They ran a lot of 12 there in Georgia, and they've got the tight end, so a lot going on. Mark Spafford wants to know, Adam, if you see J.K.Dobins as a breakout candidate in this offense under Monken.
So didn't we see today, like, the Ravens said, like, they hope Dobbins gets out there soon, which is a little concerning. So to end the season last year, remember, Dobbins obviously didn't start the season and then came along pretty slowly, but then he ended the season with like 3 100-yard games over his last 6, and if it wasn't 3, the one he did, and he had like 95. So he looked good. He was top 6 in fantasy points per opportunity during that stretch. He's always been, him and Gus Edwards, because of this offense, and maybe it changes a little bit with maybe they go less pistol formation and stuff, but he's always been up there in yards before contact per attempt. Lamar helps that out a lot. And I still think, and I said this going into last season, assuming he would be, on the field more, I still think there's an outside chance J.K.Dobins leads all running backs in touchdowns because Lamar Jackson doesn't get used at the goal line like Josh Allen, like Jalen Hurts. Lamar Jackson, I think, over the past 3 seasons, has 10 carries inside the 5. Like, J.K.Dobins, if he's getting that work at the goal line, which I think he should, in an offense that's probably going to be more explosive, I think there's an outside chance he could lead the NFL in rushing touchdowns.
Right. Go back and look at his rookie numbers. He was super explosive as a rookie. I'm hoping he regains some of that, but I'm concerned like you are. That kind of came out of the. Yeah,
definitely don't love hearing that.
Right, and you're hearing Rashad Bateman needed a cortisone shot in his foot, so a lot to watch. Again, it's June. Let's not panic or hit the panic buttons or anything, but it's something definitely worth watching. Just pivoting over to a couple other stories that are out there. Dalvin Cook, obviously a big story, but Minnesota's offense with Alexander Mattison. I think I've seen him. I mean, the immediate reaction was he jumped way up. I don't know why we were caught off guard by the Dalvin Cook news, or that we would get really enthusiastic about Mattison, or more so. I think you should have been putting some speculative plays on him at the cheap value. You knew the price was going to rise. But I've seen him go as high on some rankings up to 16 overall. Is that too high for you in an offense that's going to throw, or last year threw, 64.5% of the time?
Yeah. So my, most reactions initially were draft Alexander Mattison. Alexander Mattison is going to get 20 touches per game, which is obviously valid. My initial reaction was, I want to draft Jordan Addison. I want to draft T.J. Hockenson because, like you mentioned, in Kevin O'Connell's first season, they were top 5 in passing rate on early downs. They're top 5 in neutral script passing rate. And why would you not lean more on the pass after bringing in Addison, who I think at this point of his career is an upgrade over Adam Thielen? Hawkinson was the best tight end in the entire league outside of Travis Kelce once he joined the team last season. So, yeah, I want to draft more Jordan Addison. And Mattison for me is like RB21, RB22 range, so not up like at 16 like you mentioned, because I don't know if he's guaranteed. We don't know if he's going to be the unquestioned 20-touch running back, because they could bring in Leonard Fournette. They could bring in Kareem Hunt still. They like Ty Chandler. So for me, like, Mattison's fine, but like if he's keeps getting, kind of steamed up ahead of where I have him ranked, it's just kind of an easy avoid for me. And I'll pivot and just take Jordan Addison, who's not like going late. He's been pretty steamed this offseason too. But Justin Jefferson, top 5 in targets, routes, everything against double coverage. There was so much bracket coverage against Justin Jefferson. And Adam Thielen last year, like, he was I think he led the NFL in routes run, but he was like bottom 16 in yards per out run. He was really inefficient. You give that same opportunity, those same routes to Addison, he will be a top 30 receiver.
A bold statement from Adam Pfeifer, which is why he's here, to make bold statements. Just one more thought on the Vikings offense in general. I saw the argument out there. I think it was, again, Florio put it out there. He's a Vikings fan. Thinks they're kind of competitive. What do they want to say? Competitive tanking. It's not tanking, but they're kind of like setting themselves up to get a quarterback. Just a report just out now from Adam Schefter saying that the Vikings and Kirk Cousins won't talk contract until next March. Well, that's when he's a free agent. So obviously they seem like they're looking to move on. Is this a concern for you at all? Like, you see some of the players they're moving on from and some of the trades they've made that maybe they're just kind of low key tanking a little bit.
I don't think they'll be bad enough to tank if they tried. Right? Like, last year they played above their heads. They had all those crazy close victories. Defense. Yeah, but like defense. Even if I just don't see how that happens, because it's not like there's this clear favorite in their division. Right there with the Lions, they probably are the favorite. You have a top 12 quarterback. You have arguably the best receiver in the NFL. So, yes, the defense has to be better, obviously. I don't see how that can even happen unless like they just get the worst, luck with players getting hurt to start the season and they just say, whatever, we'll just kind of play cautious. I just don't see how they're bad enough to even be in a position to tank. Like, could they be 3-8 at one point? Maybe, but I think there's still a little bit too much talent on this team, and we know the NFC as a whole is way more wide open. So I think it's going to be tough, and I'm not really worried about it.
Yeah, what are the reporters? The local reporters are calling it a competitive rebuild, which is, I think, an ideal description, right? Because you're right; they aren't really bad enough to tank. Yet, they have some weaknesses, and they've added to some of that with some of the player moves they've made and moving on. And
players, like, you have to be active. It'll come down to like management and coaching if these players play late in the season. But if these players are on the field, they won't tank. Like, they refuse to tank. They refuse to lose games. You saw the Texans last year. That Hail Mary. They won't tank.
Yeah, totally.
So unless like late in the season, for whatever reason, Justin Jefferson's just not playing, I don't see how that happens.
And he was talking today and the last 2 days about he's going to report for training camp. Could you see a hold in here? Whether or not he gets a contract, I think the hold in is the new holdout. I think we're going to probably see some of that. We'll see what happens with these running backs if they sign their tenders at some point. Josh Jacobs and Saquon Barkley, as I suspect they will. I know they're talking like they won't, but that's now. But like Justin Jefferson, if he doesn't have that huge, extension, or, he clearly wants one, but he's there now. But if he shows up, would this bother you at all, or would you just expect him to be out there week 1 without any issues?
Yeah, hasn't even crossed my mind. Even when I read the update today, I expect him to be out there.
I do too. So like 90% or more of everything we're hearing right now, the public portion of negotiations are always the most contentious portion, right? And his isn't even contentious. He's saying, I'm going to be there, right? So it's the running backs that, they're putting out, oh, maybe I hold out, whatever. I mean, we can't absolutely rule that out, thanks Le'Veon Bell, but we can pretty much rule that out. $10 million is a lot to pass on, especially in a market where you're just not getting that at running back position. You look at the top free agent acquisitions this year, Sanders and Montgomery. It was more like the $6 million range. And you look at what Austin Ekeler would like more than his 6, and he's not getting it. So there you have that. Austin Ekeler, 38 touchdowns over the last 2 years, more than anyone else in the league. That's why he's probably Adam Pfeiffer's number one. Although we all know regression can come. I'm not going to pretend it's coming this year because I pretended it was coming last year and it didn't. And I look stupid. So there's that. We'll see what happens this year. I have some questions about the Chargers here. Mark Spafford wants to know, can Justin Herbert make a jump to top tier under Kellon Moore, and which receiver benefits the most? And I think you hinted at it. The average depth of target was not great last year.
Yeah, I absolutely love Justin Herbert this season. For starters, like, it was just really unlucky because the touchdown rate, like, scheme aside, the touchdown rate was absurd. So Justin Herbert, through his first couple seasons in the NFL, his touchdown rate was 5.7 and 5.2%. This year it was 3.6%. It was 20th in the league. It was below his career average. Despite being fourth among quarterbacks in pass attempts inside the 10-yard line, he only threw 12 touchdowns from that area. And that goes with Ekeler just converting so many touchdowns. But the scheme, like I wrote about this article in my coaching and coordinating series, Kellon Moore is going to take more deep shots, which you would love with Justin Herbert, and there will be more overall, yards after the catch because that's not Keenan Allen's game. And Mike Williams, even though he's been used more in intermediate parts of the field, when he's targeted deep, it's a jump ball and he comes down with it, hopefully. Quentin Johnson gives him way more after the catch ability that'll help Justin Herbert's overall, statistics. And the pace, too. Like, Joe Lombardi, the Chargers have been one of the fastest paced teams in the NFL the past couple seasons. They've actually been, over the past 2 seasons, they've led the NFL in seconds per snap at 25.9. The only team below them during that span has been Dallas. So the pace should be right around the same it's been, which we love for fantasy. They've been top 5 in no huddle rate at 14%. So everything you love in terms of pass rate, pace, more deep shots, Justin Herbert should have. Plus, his receivers will be healthy this season. I mean, Keenan Allen and Mike Williams played not even 10 games together last year, full games. So I'm all in on Justin Herbert. I don't think it's as likely as some of the other quarterbacks, but I think he could finish I think we could see Justin Herbert at the end of the season 40+ touchdowns.
Right, like Keenan Allen is old, and by the way, when he was not hurt, he didn't play like an old guy. I believe down the last.
He was like the wide receiver too.
Yeah, he was right up at the top well inside the top 5. I think for week 13 on, and I think there were portions of that where he was definitely wide receiver too. So JSC would like to know this, Adam. He's trying to decide on the zero running back versus the hero running back strategy. What can you offer him?
So it depends on the draft, obviously, but I've liked a lot of the builds, at least in best ball, where I take, I go kind of with the anchor approach. So I'll take a top 10 running back at some point, whether it's the first round, second round, whatever. I'll try to get one of the 10 best running backs, and then I'll just go all wide outs, all tight ends until the later parts of the draft. That's kind of my favorite way to go. But in terms of hero and zero, I guess hero would kind of be the same as what I just said. But yeah, that's kind of my favorite way to go. But I will say, and especially in these best ball formats, because wide receivers get pushed up so much in best ball, there's actually a lot of really good zero RB candidates if you do want to go that route. We mentioned James Cook. I think both Washington running backs are in that discussion. There's a ton. Samaje Perine is a really good one. So I think this is a really good year to do it, especially because wide receivers are being pushed up naturally.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. You look at some of these running backs, one of my favorites is going to be James Conner, just because he's the only game in town. I think there's opportunity there. This could all get squashed if they add somebody, but there's a team that's actually tanking without a doubt. But Rashad White's going fairly late, Isaiah Pacheco, A.J. Dillon, you mentioned both Washington receivers, all 3 Chicago Bears. Take your choice outside the top 30. Outside the top 30. You can get any of the Miami Dolphins running backs you want outside the top 40, maybe down into the 50s. So there are a lot of pieces down there, and one that I like an awful lot, Jerick McKinnon in Kansas City, is, I think in best ball 10s is 49 right now. Look, I don't expect him to have 8 touchdowns over 6 games every 6-game stretch, but he's capable of that in this offense. And if that's almost a flyer if you get him as your running back 4 or 5.
Yeah, I absolutely love him. There's always discussion after Kelsey, right, for fantasy. Who is the wide receiver you want to draft from Kansas City? Is it Sky Moore? Is it Rashee Rice? Is it Kadarius Toney? What if it's Jerick McKinnon? Right? I'm not expecting, like you mentioned, the touchdowns or he was the number 2 fantasy running back from weeks 14 to 18
Yep.
behind McCaffrey. Don't expect that. Do not expect that. Don't expect the 7
But it could
touchdowns.
happen.
It could, especially because the Chiefs are the pass heaviest offense inside the red zone. It's rare that's why I don't really love Pacheco. They just don't, first and goal from the 5, you don't really see them go eye for him and just hand it to Pacheco. And as a result, we saw McKinnon second behind Ekeler in among running backs in targets from inside the red zone with 16 and targets inside the 10-yard line with 11. He played 78.5% of Kansas City's third downs last year. That was the second highest rate among all running backs behind Rhamondre Stevenson. Apparently, Clyde Edwards-Helaire is getting some reps at wide receiver. Good luck. I think there's a trust with McKinnon. He's great in his role. He still goes late enough to where it's like you're not drafting Jerick McKinnon to get 12 carries, but you're drafting him to do what he did last year. Not to that level, but a lot. I would go on to say a lot of teams that won season-long championships. A lot of them picked up and started Jerick McKinnon in the last 5 weeks.
Yeah, I think you're drafting that role or a similar role or the similar opportunities. Whether he cashes in on them to the same degree remains to be seen. But
yeah,
running back 50-ish, that's what you're getting. Mr. Scamper's current trend: 16 TDs for Ekeler. This is true. That would be 54 in 3 seasons, down 2 a year. I don't even I keep thinking that's a landing spot for Dalvin Cook, right? Until I heard today how much money Dalvin Cook wants, and I don't think there are no landing spots for $10 million Dalvin Cook. Sorry, Dalvin, it's not going to happen. JSC thinks Kadarius Toney is going to be the wide receiver 1. He's not sold on MVS. I don't think they're sold on MVS, although I heard he made a great play today. Nice.
I can't quit Toney. I can't quit him. I loved him as a prospect. We know the targets per out run data when he's on the field. But schematically and what he does well, he fits this West Coast Andy Reid offense so well. Andy Reid, the last handful of seasons, we all fall in love with Patrick Mahomes, incredible throws 50 yards down the field. This has been the screen heaviest team in football for years. They throw a ton of screen passes. Mahomes has been top 5 in screen attempts 4 straight seasons. Kadarius Toney, with his ability after the catch, how shifty he is, and they were throwing at him they were giving a 1.5 screens per game down the stretch, and now he has a full offseason to be acclimated even more to the offense. Hopefully, be healthy. I think when they run, they don't run a lot of 3 wide. They run a lot of 2 receiver sets, a lot of 12 actually. When they run 2 wide sets, I think it's Toney and MVS. It's definitely MVS. Not that he's going to be the best player, but he'll be on the field. I think it's going to be him and Toney. And if you're telling me Toney can't draw targets with just MVS on the field, obviously Kelsey will be too. But the problem is everybody else, even though there's a ton of people that are just nope, it's not going to happen with Toney. He's always hurt. His ADP is still pretty high, so it's you can't even really get him. You have to kind of pay for him still. But I think the fit with the scheme with Andy Reid is so good, and he has a full offseason to be more prepared. I understand he only played 7 snaps and 5 routes in the Super Bowl, but also it's a Super Bowl. It's the most important game of the season. I think Kadarius Toney will be on the field more starting week 1.
Right. I think there's a preview. You're paying a preview for the perceived wide receiver 1 playing with Patrick Mahomes. We're all waiting for that guy to emerge. We can go back to his time with the Giants and that huge debut game, that breakout game against Dallas, where he kind of gave us the full display. Caught 180, 190 yards worth of passes, 10 passes, and punched somebody in the face. There you have it. Kadarius Toney in a nutshell. Probably got.
And they did trade for him at the end of the day. It's not like he was just
they did.
He was just cut, and they're all right, we'll sign him. They actively traded for him. So I'm still in, but cautiously optimistic would be the best way.
I'm with you, and we'll acknowledge that I am injury agnostic. I don't pay attention to the injury history as much. it factors in, but it's not going to be.
Listen, that's a fine way to look at it though, because if you always looked at the track record with players getting hurt, you would have missed out on Keenan Allen's couple of huge seasons, because remember everybody said Keenan Allen was injury prone when he had a spleen and an ACL injury, 2 completely fluke injuries, and then all of a sudden he didn't get hurt and he was amazing.
Right. I always like to remind people there is a difference between chronically injured and chronic injuries. If someone's chronically injured, that's just the circumstances of the game. It's a collision sport. You're going to get hurt. You're going to take these big
players are injury prone until they aren't.
Right. If somebody has a bone-on-bone condition, a chronic condition somewhere like a knee or something, then I'm going to pay more attention. Mark Spafford wants to know if we would fade Tyreek Hill a little based on Tua's concussion history. Tua's doing things to manage that, right? He's trying a new helmet. He took jiu-jitsu all year to maybe judo. I guess it was judo. They've been saying jiu-jitsu, but I think it was judo because, the rolls and everything, falling is such a big part of that he's like really worked on not bouncing his head off the floor. Either way, I have a 2-word answer here, Adam, and you can tell me if I'm crazy. The 2-word answer is no. The answer is Mike White. I mean, if there is no Tua, I feel kind of comfortable that Mike White could get something done there.
We were at a point last season where we were praying Mike White was starting for the Jets. And that may have more to do with Zach Wilson being terrible, but no, Mike McDaniel's scheme was awesome with Tyreek. He, I think, led the NFL in targets per out run. The pre-snap motion, like with how much pre-snap motion they use, I think it was like 65%, easily led the NFL. It's going to create easy reads for whoever's at quarterback. And I think Mike White is, like, Tyreek had some fine games. Obviously, his fantasy production came down without Tua, but he still had some fine games with Teddy Bridgewater. I think the one game with Skylar Thompson was an absolute train wreck, but no, I have no concerns.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you, and I'm like, again, hopeful for Tua. I mean, this is obviously not a great situation. That kind of history is definitely worrisome. One hit could be the thing that ends his season, and I get that. I'm still drafting him. I'm drafting the hell out of him. I think he's a pretty good value. Seems to be a lot of value at quarterbacks. Guys like Geno Smith and Jarod Goff in particular stand out to me, Adam. Do we feel like there were like one-hit wonders, or what is the issue with them going well into the double-digit rounds as quarterback dues, essentially?
Well, the problem with Jarod Goff is you can't play him when he's on the road. His home road splits were absolutely insane last season. All jokes aside, though, like Geno, it's just one of the craziest stories last year, what he did. And this is a different Seattle offense. I wrote about it a lot today. So I don't know if it's I don't know if it's like, Russell Wilson, look at us, we're throwing the ball now. But 2021, Russell Wilson's final season they were 48% pass rate on early downs. It was like 25th in the league. First year without Russell Wilson, they go up to 59%. It was top 5 in the league, or top 6 in the league. And they actually ran a lot of empty. Like they led the league in empty formations on early downs. They trusted Geno to throw the ball a ton. And now you're adding, I think this is clearly the best wide receiver trio in the league. I understand Jamar Chase is as good as he is, but I think Seattle's trio is the best in the league. And you're telling me adding JSN, they're going to stop throwing? No, I think some expect, like Geno made, like, I don't think it's a fluke what Geno did, because it wasn't like DK Metcalf was running wide open, Lockett was running wide open. Geno Smith probably had 4 of the 10 best throws of the NFL season last year. Like he was just unbelievable. So, and then, of course, I think Zach Charbonnet is an upgrade out of the backfield as a pass-catching running back than Rashad Penny and even Ken Walker. So, yeah, Geno is like, it's tough to rank him as like a QB1 because the position's so loaded, but he's a really rock-solid QB, high-end QB2. And even if you just completely fall asleep at quarterback, you can start him or draft him and start him week 1 if you really, really fall asleep at quarterback.
Dame overboard with the proposition of the night. What if the Rams start out slow and trade Kupp to the Chiefs? Then we would have to like create an entirely new tier of player. There's like it would like be a thing that we've never seen before. Oh my God, that's horrifying.
If they do, they just freed a bunch of cap space by restructuring his contract, so maybe they're up to something.
That would be crazy. Thielen, Chark, Terrace Marshall. What about? Oh yeah, that's a tough group. I do think maybe we're overlooking this. Like I'm not a big Thielen guy, but I think like maybe there's something to be said for Chark and Terrace Marshall. They get things going. I think there's probably more to be said for Sanders and Hayden Hurst playing with Bryce Young. Any interest beyond Miles Sanders for you in Carolina, Adam?
I had a lot of interest in Terrace Marshall as a post-type sleeper, but that was before free agency and the draft. So that changes a little bit. He apparently made some nice plays at camp today or yesterday, I think. I don't know. Like I just at that point of the draft, like you don't have to draft receivers from that team. Like just if I'm taking upside swings, I'm looking for upside swings on elite high volume passing offenses. So and Carolina, like I'm kind of with you. Like not that I'm actively drafting him, but in Frank Reich's tight end friendly scheme, I might just take Hayden Hurst, honestly.
Yeah, it's a late, kind of, if you maybe take a little chance earlier or as a third tight end, he's available that late. JSC thinks Jonathan Mingo might be a nice start throw later on. We'll see. I'm not enthusiastic. I'm going to get you one more, Adam, before we get you out of here, man. Thanks so much for the time. Again, you should follow Adam on Twitter at APfeifer24. That's Pfeifer numerals 24. You should check out his work at Fade the Noise Fantasy, FTN Fantasy Network. Just great stuff. You should check out his latest article, his Sleeper Bust article in the Pro Forecast, the 34th edition, available in digital format now on the website. You can order up, use the promo code Diehards for a discount. When we're all said and done, the season's over, what is Aaron Rodgers?
Hopefully in second place in the AFC East. I think he'll be in that, like, for fantasy, I think he'll be in that QB 12 to 14 range. Look, they're going to be really slow. Like, Rodgers' offense and Hackett's offenses have been really slow. And, like, I think if Brees is healthy, they want to run the football and play defense with a top 5 defense. I don't know how many games they're going to be 38-35 with the Jets with how good their defense is. So he'll have some weeks because he's still one of the best, throwers of the football we've ever seen. But yeah, I think he'll be in that QB kind of like 12 to 14 range.
Yeah, the Athletic saying today, Brees Hall, don't expect that early appearance, strong start to the season from Brees Hall.
It's going to be the same as Saquon Barkley's year after his ACL. He's going to start out slow, maybe miss a game, maybe be like 40% snaps, and then once he's good to go, he'll be up to like 75.
Yep, I think that's a fair assessment. We've seen it the last couple of years. We have this number in our mind that it's this long and an ACL is healed. No, it's some amount around this long, and it's 9 to 12 months for some. It's more so, and for us, it's been more than an hour, so we will call it a night. Appreciate everyone coming again. Hit the like button if you liked what you saw. We'll be back here Saturday for an Ask Me Anything. And again, every Wednesday, 7 p.m., every Saturday at noon. You can check out the Football Diehards radio program. We'll be on from 7 to 9 p.m. on Saturday night again this week. Go to the Football Diehards website. All kinds of cool stuff there, including the digital edition of the Pro Forecast and great Sleeper Bust article by one Adam Pfeifer. Also a great O-line article, as well as he's been handling those duties for a handful of years as well. Adam, thanks so much, man. Really appreciate you. We'll have to do this again soon.
Absolutely, Bob.